Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Well, not really. What we will, however, be talking about is sex, penetration, and gays. Vaginal penetration and the procreation was crucial to most, if not all, religions in early America. Those that prohibited sex altogether perished over time. Thus, the notion of gay men and women having non-procreative sex finds homophobia rooted here. Starting off with the Native Americans and sexuality, we see there to be a very distinct connection between the celebration and the growth into female sexuality. They celebrated the woman's blooming into womanhood and the ability for her to procreate. Her first menstrual cycle represented her change from childhood into adulthood, which many early Native Americans believed to be one of the defining moments in a woman's life. Our dear Puritans on the Hill represented the ideological community of believers in God. Those that were going to design their entire community around the simple notion that the puritanical church preached. From the sexual roles that women were taught to the idea that clergy were the only ones that should be interpreting the Bible. Women were not allowed to engage in anything remotely sexual without their father's permission. If we were to skip forward a few years into a recent increase in Catholic presence in early America, we see the story of Maria Monk come to light. Her story represented the immoral behavior that was occurring behind the walls of the convent. Premarital sex, lesbian relations, and abortions were all allegations that had been raised against this particular convent. They were taking women from their families and not allowing them to see them again. These abortions and premarital sex stories truly hit a chord with the foundations of most American religions had been preaching at the time, in that sex is reserved exclusively for marriage and procreation tied together. And the need for children, Protestant white children, was growing ever stronger. We see similar problems with Mormons as they begin to form the core foundations of their religion. They could not sacrifice having few numbers and not procreating. The need for more members is a surefire way of doing this is through sex. The Zuni man-woman was a curious case for America at the time, and they were befuddled by the very nature of him or her, even following many anthropological studies. The Zuni man-woman poked many holes in America's tight view on how sex and gender roles should be formed. How could this human exist in such ambiguity? This belief that all individuals were clearly labeled under gender roles was substantially incorrect. As time progressed and as sex was more liberalized, there were more notions that people were allowed to have sex for the sake of just having sex, ergo, heterosexuality. Men were going to see prostitutes if they saw fit, and women who were more hypersexual were pushed in the direction of brothels. The notion of homosexuality had not begun to form at this time, but we do see the roots in the notion that sex does not have to be procreative. During this time, Christianity was labeled as a more feminine object than a masculine and powerful one. In reaction to this, many men began to form groups that would promote physical activity and muscle building as well as a love for God. In order to remake this view in America, these he-men would become the objects of admiration. All men would aspire to be like them. Out of this movement bloomed the YMCA, and the Y was quickly associated with homosocial behaviors. Not only did they spend most of the time together, paid for by women, but they traveled and lived and breathed in each other's company. It is then to no surprise that sexual relations began to form. These men were engaging in non-procreative sex as well as homosexual relations, something foreign to most at the time. But trembling before God touches on the same tones as the Y. These gay men and women were subjugated against because they loved one another. However, as gays and Orthodox, they were forced to read Scripture exactly, which inevitably resulted in the question, is it even possible to be gay and Orthodox? The act of penetration for procreation's sake was not occurring. For Orthodox Jews, the only way to spread the faith is to remain God's people, and to remain God's people is through having babies. The fundamentalism revival in America is stemmed out of a long-growing sentiment that America was and is still not on the right path in the eyes of God. We do not have sex to procreate, and we allow gays to exist and marry. And lastly, we are not living the words of the Bible at all. But all that told, the history of the United States is steamed in the notion that procreation and the creation of a new generation of believers is foremost in the thoughts of religious leaders and followers. Without these children, the United States as we know today could not exist. Religion was and is still a part of the core of the United States. It is a guiding tool for most of our history. From its early times until recently, people turned to religion for answers, from everything from how sex to how to oil their wagon.